So I was recently reminded of this photo on the stern of the Titanic, and I realized I have not the slightest clue as to why we use that word. Although historically debated, the general unanimous consensus is that Archimedes invented the screw circa 200 BCE, though most likely the idea was adapted from Egyptian engineering. Now, what does Archimedes have to do with the propeller? Now, Archimedes designed the screw to push the matter inside the screw forward or backward, which would have looked something like this. This is because Archimedes designed the screw mainly for moving water upward. This was extremely useful in fields like irrigation, since water doesn't like flowing uphill. Use of the screw would mainly stay concentrated in agriculture. However, its use would go on and off throughout history, being in a cycle of being forgotten and rediscovered. One of the most famous examples of the screw being used outside of agriculture is actually Da Vinci. He used the screw in his theoretical helicopter. It was also around Da Vinci's time that people started to theorize about using screws for propulsion power. After all, the screw could push matter backward, meaning that theoretically it could propel itself, which was the same reasoning behind Da Vinci's helicopter. Because of this, the idea of using screws for propelling ships actually predates the application of the concept by around 150 years. People had the basic idea around in the early 1700s, however the only problem was the steam engine. They developed the concept, but the problem was there's no way to power the screw itself, especially considering it was underwater. To do that, they would have to wait over 100 years for an advanced enough steam engine, and by then they were already 6 feet under. Once 100 years had passed, however, and sufficient technology had been invented, Francis Smith would become the pioneer behind maritime screw propulsion. Circa 1834, he would experiment with screw propulsion on miniature models of wooden boats in a reservoir near his farm, and through this he was convinced of the potential of such a design. In 1835, with Thomas Pilgrim, he would construct a more well-rounded model, and in 1836, Francis would acquire a patent for his design. Soon after his patent, he will build a test boat, the SS Francis Smith, which will operate in the Paddington Canal till 1837. Looking at a scale model recreation of this boat, you might notice something bizarre. The screw is quite screw-looking. Now, the reason for this is quite simple. The fact that shorter screws meant better propulsion was only just discovered, and it was through a very interesting accident. While Smith was testing his first model in the Paddington Canal, half of the screw that was propelling the boat just broke off. Now, right after this, to the surprise of everyone, the boat immediately started to move much faster, because science. After this, in an effort to convince the British Admiralty of the potential of his patent, Smith would finance and start the Ship Propeller Company, and yes, Smith came up with that word. The first practical screw-propelled ship for the Ship Propeller Company would be designed by Edward Pascoe, constructed by Henry Wilmhurst, and be named the SS Archimedes in honor of Archimedes, the original inventor of the screw. Looking at the screw of the SS Archimedes, you can see that the design was already fast evolving, with the length being cut down significantly for efficiency. The agreement with the British Navy was that the screw would be implemented if the ship, weighing around 237 tons, could crack a humble 5 miles an hour. And for extra comparison, the ship would be raced against another ship, the paddle steamer PS Wigeon. To the shock of many, the tests were actually a smashing success. Not only did the SS Archimedes travel at over 5 miles an hour, it traveled at almost 10 knots. This event actually became the main factor that motivated Isambard Kingdom Brunel to change the design of the SS Great Britain from paddle-powered to screw-powered, and in which the rest is history from that point on. So, if you want someone to blame for this word, you can blame Archimedes, and like a lot of other things in history, the British.